We're starting. Okay. See, this is the part that will be edited out.
Right, okay. Oh, you're getting all spiffy here and comfy. Okay.
Well, you know, you got to think about what looks good to the camera.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm here with my mom. You can see the date on there. It's the 6th of September, 1992. And this is the first of a series of video diaries. And you are the first. So you're the pioneer, yet again. So we're going to be talking to Mom. She'll tell us a little about her life, which she promises won't be too interesting. So
The part I'm going to tell you is
We'll
not
find
that
out.
interesting, I said.
I'm excited. I can't wait. But there may yield some good things, so sit through it, and we'll see. We'll take it from here. So I'll turn the show over to Mom and have her tell us a little bit about her life, about her family, her parents, and let's just start. Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay.
I was born June 5th, 1934, to Clyde Ellis Burgess and Gladys Alverna Hammer Burgess. At the time, we lived in a very, very little T9C town called Deming, Washington. We lived on a farm. We raised, we had about 8 or 9 cows and umpteen chickens. And we had pigs and we had horses, and we plowed our fields with the horses and brought our hay in with the horses. I learned very much about life on that farm.
How long had your grandfather lived in Washington?
How
Or
long
your father?
My father, my father's people had been here in the United States for quite some time. It was his last name was Burgess, and they used to try and say, well, we came from the House of Burgesses in Virginia during the Revolutionary War. We don't know whether we did or not, but it's okay. It makes a good story, right? On my mother's side, my grandmother came from Norway, and my grandfather came from Sweden, and you'll not find that too often because, as I understand it, the Swedes and the Norwegians did not get along very well in the old country, but evidently things changed when they came to this country because here I am. And I had a very, very good childhood. I guess we were poor, but I didn't know that. We had as much as the rest of the neighbors had. I'm sure that my mother was not terribly pleased when she found out that she was going to have me because I have 2 older brothers that were 6 years and 4 years older than me. And I was born in 1934 in the deepest part of the Depression. But we all survived, and maybe because I was the first girl and the first granddaughter on both sides, they were quite pleased. I have a little brother that was 18 months younger than me, and a sister 7 years younger than me, and they're all, can I say geeks? Yes, I can. I can say geeks, and proud of it. My son is not proud.
Right.
But Katie, you'll like it. I went to a little country school that I graduated from Mount Baker High School, and this is about 20 miles east of Bellingham, Washington. I was born in Bellingham.
Tell us about the house you grew up in.
The house I grew up with, the first house was a 3-story, just a regular old house that...
Is that the one you burned down?
Yeah, we didn't burn it down, we just tried to. It was built on stumps. It had these huge stumps that they had cleared the forest out, and they put the what would you call the 2x4s? Only there were 8x8s or whatever across these stumps. That was what the foundation was. In those days, you did not have regular foundations. And my little brother Lee and I decided to burn cobwebs downstairs, down underneath the house. And we were going to get rid of all of these cobwebs. And about a couple hours later, my mom happened to look out the upstairs window, and there was fire coming out. There was flames coming out. So they had the bucket brigade with my two older brothers and my dad and my mom, and they got the fire out. And my little brother and I were not terribly popular at that time. We must have been 7 and 5 at the time, but I still remember. We didn't get spanking.
You almost didn't make it to 8 and 6 then.
Right, we almost didn't make it to 8 and 6, yeah. And so when I graduated from high school, I went to the big city of Seattle.
Why?
Because I thought I was big stuff, and I had all the answers in the world. I knew it all. I knew it all. And so I went to Seattle, and I got myself a job at an insurance company. I made $35 a week. And at first I was filing, and then they taught me how to run a calculator type of thing. It was called a Freedom calculator. That was the latest in electric adding machines. And this would divide, multiply, and everything. And so I learned that. And then I went to a job at a dealership, a Ford dealership. And because I still knew all there was to know. And I worked in the accounts receivable at that time, and that is where I met Mr. Marshall Harold Webster. I didn't even like him at first. I got to like him later on. And so, but I went to work there for $200 a month. That was lots of money. I had the world by the tail. I bought a car. I had a 48 Ford, and my very own.
Now this is 1955, 56.
1955.
Okay.
54, 55. And I had my own car, and I had my own, well, actually, it was I rented a room in the University District of Seattle, and that's where I was. But I had my own car, and I had my own job, and I was doing well. So then your dad and I got married, and we decided to, after we had Bill in the Swedish Hospital in Seattle, and we had Clyde Ellis in Northgate Hospital in a suburb of Seattle. Well, I think it's in Seattle now. And then Dad went on strike, and so we came back here to Michigan. Mm-hmm. And Michigan has been very good. And I didn't like Michigan. I thought it was horrible. So Dad said, well, we'll go to Texas.
Why?
Because I didn't like Michigan. When we came back, it was like, we came back to his aunt and uncle's in Tech, and it was so cold. We came back in January of 1959, and it was bitter cold. It was 17 degrees at night, and at that time they didn't have wind chill factors and all of this kind of stuff. So Dad kept saying, Well, it's never this cold in Michigan. Ever. It is never this cold in Michigan. This is just a different year. So that summer, we're living in Port Huron, and I'm sick all summer. It is so hot and smelly, and the humidity is really high, and it's just not good. And so Dad said, but Michigan never has summers this hot. They just never have summers this hot. So I thought in my mind, we don't have winters this cold and we don't have summers this hot. He's got a lot to learn. So his brother Fred and his wife came up with their 4 children in August, and they talked us into going to Texas. So we went down there, I believe it was in October of 1959. And so Fred was born down there in Fort Worth, Texas.
Frederick Allen.
And we had Frederick Allen. And we had a tornado while we were down there. And I didn't like that because that was a new experience. I was used to earthquakes and things like that. I'm not used to tornadoes. So I didn't like that. So I wanted to go back to Seattle because I was homesick. And Dad decided to bring me back to Michigan. So we came back to Michigan, and we lived in Yale, and that's where Tammy was born. And then we moved on. He got a real good job. Tammy was born in 1961.
Can you move back to Yale?
1960. We were only in Fort Worth, well, from October until Memorial Weekend, which was the end of May. We were down there very long. And so I've been in Michigan ever since. And it's okay.
Let's go back a little bit. Tell us about your father. What do you remember
My dad
most about him?
My dad had a terrific sense of humor. He came, his father, okay. His father's name was James, and he was killed in the 1920s in a threshing machine accident. No, it had to have been 1916 because my dad was 16 years old when his dad was killed. And left his mother with 7 children and pregnant with the 8th child. And my dad was the oldest. So he did not get to finish high school, which wasn't anything out of the ordinary at that time. He did get to finish 8th grade. And he went to work and helped his mom and the rest of the kids. Put some food on the table. They didn't have welfare. They didn't have all of those other things. You were on your own. And my grandfather, James, had gotten his leg caught in a threshing machine, which they don't even have now, and actually bled to death. He was in there. He was trying to fix it, and somebody turned the machine on, or they did something, or they started to move it, and he got his leg caught. And he bled to death before they could get someone, because they were out in the wheat field in eastern Washington is where they were. So my dad went to work, and somehow they all survived.
So your dad was a farmer and a lumberjack?
Yeah, well, he was a farmer at that point. Then when he met my mother, they met at Orcas Island in the San Juan Islands of Puget Sound. And my mother was working in a fish cannery, I believe. And I don't know what my dad was doing over there on the island, but that's where they met. And they were married November 16th, 1926. And Bert was born in 1927, Bob was born in 1930, I was born in 34. My little brother was born in 36, and then my sister was born in 1941. My mom was born the one that's half Norwegian and half Swedish, was born in Sumas, Washington, which is right on the Canadian border. And I guess they bought this little farm where I was born and raised. I know that one summer they lived in a tent. This is before they got the farm. And I've listened to her talk about having Bert and Bob and living in the tent for the summer. But in Washington you can do that because you don't have the wild weather that you have in Michigan. And so then they bought the farm. My little brother and I were very close, Lee. And where one of us was, the other one was.
In trouble was.
In trouble. Right. And we rode our horses. Of course, you've got to remember that these were big draft workhorses. They were Belgians. And so their backs were about that. About that wide. So when you went to get off of them, you walked very funny. Because you didn't have saddles and things like that. You rode them bareback. And so I learned a lot on that farm. A lot. I recommend it to everyone. I would not, I'm glad that I'm not, I did not raise children on the farm, but I'm glad that I was raised on the farm. And so that's, no, a farm is a great place to be raised.
You must have worked a lot.
Well,
Chores?
yeah, you had your chores, but everybody had chores. I mean, it wasn't chores.
What did you farm?
We had we just had regular old grass that my dad used to cut and put in. He had oats, and he had timothy, and then he had this stuff that it was just grass to me. It seemed like all the neighbors said, Clyde cut his hay, so that means it's going to rain, and it always rained on Dad's hay. Always rained on Dad's hay. Everybody knew that it was going to rain because the Burgesses cut their hay. And yeah, we used the horses, brought it in on sleds. When I was 6, my dad was kicked in the head with a horse. His name was Baldy. It left
The horse's name, not your dad.
no, my dad's name was Clark. Anyway, the horse's name was Baldy, and it was a very traumatic part of our life. He was in a coma for about 3 months, and they didn't know whether he was going to come out or not. And when he did come out, he was very good. I mean, it didn't seem to bother him at all. You would have thought that he would have had some problems, either mentally or walking or whatever, because he was kicked right here. And when they actually didn't, well, they operated, he had some broken bones in here, so they just took the bone out. And then they sewed him up, like you would just take a piece of material and just bring it this way and whip it, you know. And so he had this funny thing, but they did not think that he was going to live. So they didn't take any time sewing it properly. So he had this big indentation here, and this funny, you know, like hem, I guess you would call it, or seam here that looked like. But that was my dad. I don't remember him without it because I was only 6 when it happened. So he always had this. So that was just the way he was. Maybe to someone else, now that I look back, they probably would wonder about that. But that was my dad.
What did you ever do with Baldy?
Baldy, this is not nice, but my older brother, who was 13, his name is Bert, and he was 13 at the time, and he was so upset with Baldy that he starved Baldy to death. Now you can ask Bert, because Bert says that now, but at the time, but Baldy did die, not too much, probably about 8 or 10 months later, but But I believe Bert when he said that he starved him to death because he kicked his dad. But I think what happened was Lee and I were on the sled, and Dad used to take us for rides on the sled. And so Baldy must have stepped on a stone. You know, he didn't have horseshoes on or anything. He must have stepped on a stone or something and kicked back while my dad was standing at the end of the sled with the reins in his hand, and Dad happened to be there. And so I just remember Dad falling and my mother screaming and opened up his shirt, and there was a little bit of blood, and then turned his head. And then you could see this was all here. And because this was in 1940, it took quite a while. Bellingham was about 20 miles away, so it took quite some time, and I do not know how long, but it took quite some time for the ambulance. We didn't have a telephone at the time, and so for the ambulance to come out and get him and take him into the hospital. One of the neighbor people stopped by, and they happened to see us because it happened close to the road in our driveway. And and Bert, my older brother, he went riding on his bicycle to go to the same neighbor that happened to come by later on. And he got upset and threw because the chain kept coming off of his bicycle, and he was, at 13, he was very, very, he was probably scared to death because he didn't know what had happened to Dad. So he threw his bicycle over the bridge down into the ravine in Kenny Creek, and ran the rest of the way to get to the telephone call for my dad. And so he came out of it, and of course he didn't work for a year or so. And I do
how'd you
remember.
support yourself?
Huh? I do remember. Well, his mother, my grandma Burgess, came and helped milk the cows and everything, and Bert and Bob, my two older brothers, they stayed on the farm, and me and my little brother Lee went to my Grandma Hammer's in Bellingham, because that's where the hospital was, and my mom stayed with us, with Grandma Hammer, and then Grandma Burgess and Bert and Bob stayed on the farm and did everything to do with the farm. It wasn't a very big farm, so it wasn't that traumatic, but Grandma Burgess could milk cows, and she could take care of all. She could plow the back 40. My Grandma Hammer couldn't, but Grandma Burgess could and did. She didn't have any problem with that. There wasn't any, well, you're a girl and you're a boy kind of thing with my Grandma Burgess, because she had been a widow for many, many years, and she had probably do lots of things to raise her children that it didn't make any difference if you were a boy or a girl. The kids had to eat. And that's the way that happened. And I just, so my little brother and I stayed in Bellingham at Grandma's, along with my mother while my dad was in hospital. But I do remember them having, they used to have Grange Hall dances on Saturday nights. And there's lots of places, even back here, that's called Grange Hall Road and anything. But the Grange was a national fraternity of farmers, and I'm not quite sure exactly what they did, but I know that my mom and dad were very involved with the Grange. And every little place had their Grange halls. And on Saturday nights, to make money, they had dances. And so we had the Welcome Grange Hall, and they had also charity dances. And they brought my mother $90-some.
Wow.
Because of they didn't call it a charity. What did they call it? Anyway, I remember them bringing my mother this money from the dance that they had, and all she could do was cry during this period of when my dad couldn't work. My dad, of course, they had doctor and hospital bills and everything, and there was no such thing as health insurance at that time. You took care of your own, and that was the way it was. And so I remember when my little sister was born, I was 7, and all the doctors at that time used to have farms. Maybe they still do, I do not know, but anyway, my mom and dad paid the doctor with a new calf
Oh.
for Judy. And so she
It's kind of a swap, a calf for
yeah,
a baby.
yeah. Well, if you don't have any money, you have a new calf. That's the way that went. And I remember that part. Now, how they paid for me and anybody else, I do not know, but I do remember them giving Dr. Brinson a calf for when Judy was born. And so I think that's why the old doctors had farms, because probably a lot of people paid them in chickens and cows and goats. And they had to have some place to put those. And so anyway, we came back to Michigan.
Well, tell us about your high school now.
My high school. Okay, I went to this, in fact, just this year. They tore my high school down, I understand. It was built in 1922, and last year, or dedicated in 1922 or 1923. It was a two-story, just a regular brick high school. In the front of it, it had a replica, a cement or concrete replica of Mount Baker, because it was Mount Baker High School. And it was a great school. I thought that it was terrific.
Were you involved in many activities?
I was involved in some cheerleading, and I was involved in, I liked math, I liked English, depending on the teacher that you got. At the time, I liked a teacher called Miss Adams, or Mrs. Adams, who was my typing and shorthand teacher. But later on, I found out that Miss Warner was the teacher who I did not like, was the teacher that I really learned from, and not Mrs. Adams. Because Mrs. Adams was too soft, and you didn't learn nothing. And Miss Warner, I learned a lot of good English from her. And so a little lesson there in life. And high school.
Did you, now,
I
sounds like you guys would have skied at Mount Baker. Did you ski?
I skied only once, but at the time, because you had to go to Mount Baker, and at the time they had the skis that you had, the bindings that your feet stayed in those skis no matter what. You could break your ankle and your knee and your leg and twist it in pretzels, and the ski would not come off of the boot. Also, this would be interesting. When I was growing up, and we had a lot of poliomyelitis, and we had a lot of tuberculosis. And I know that one of my older brother's friends, and one of Bert's friends and one of Bob's friends, they both had polio, and they both ended up dying, but because they were bulbar, which meant that the lung, and they were in the iron lungs. See, by the time that anybody sees this video, people will not even know what an iron lung was. But in the 40s, at the part that I remember, in the early 50s, we had iron lungs, and for people that would get polio. Now, I think they called it infantile paralysis at the time. Now they call it poliomyelitis. And and then there was this other friend of my brother's that had gone skiing, talking about skiing, and his leg hurt so bad, and so he came to our house, because our house seemed to have everybody just kind of got congregated at our house. And so my mom told him, we better go see the doctor. Your leg is hurting that bad. He said, nah, it's okay. He said, I'll be okay. I think I hurt it when I was skiing. And so his name was Curtis Finley. And so finally he was kind of sick and didn't feel good, and thought he had the flu and his leg was hurting. Well, by the time that he did go see the doctor, he lost most of this leg. He was crippled. He did end up being able to walk on it, but he would have to kind of throw his leg, and then he could stand on it and walk, and then he'd throw the leg. And but there was a lot of polio and a lot of tuberculosis, and they had what they called the TB sand, it's called the tuberculosis sanitariums. And they used to send you away to those, and they would make you stay in bed. I don't know how good this was, but I guess a lot of people survived them. And they would make you stay in bed and be inside this building for 8, 10 months, or a year and a half. And they used to do crafts, make leather wallets and things like that. But that was when I was growing up, and it was very, they did not know where polio came from, nor TB. But that did not affect our family, other than the friends. But our immediate family, we didn't have any problem. And my mother is now 85. I should put this on there. She just came back from Nunavik in the Northwest Territories, which is a little Eskimo town, village way up. It's not the Bering Sea. It's up above someplace. Anyway, it's in the Northwest Territories. You have to go through the Yukon to get to it. And she is just going great. Her mother lived to be 96. And so maybe I'll live to be 85 or 90. Maybe I'll live to, yeah, okay. And that Norwegian Swedish stock is very, very good stock. My mother is 85. She has a sister that's 83. She has a sister, Esther, that's 83. She has a sister, Ada, that's got to be 80. She has a sister, Hazel, that's got to be 78, and Pauline is about 73. So this is the family, the 5 girls, and they're all still alive. So, a fine, sturdy stock. They're Swedes and Norwegians. Mm-hmm. And on my dad's side, his mother lived to be 96 also. And his dad was killed when he was only 16. So, but his mother did live to be 96. So on both sides, they live forever. And they're in relatively good health. It's not like they have strokes or they, if they do get sick, they're not sick for years. They just get sick and die and do their thing. That's it. And they don't end up in nursing homes and things like that some families have. Now we got to go back to, we came here to Michigan. Now, when Bill was born at Swedish Hospital in Seattle, and then, I don't even remember what I was doing. When Bill was born, I was working at Bill Pierre Motors, and Dad was working at Bill Pierre Motors. I should bring this up. The 4-letter word Ford, F-O-R-D, has been a very, very important word in my life. My very first automobile ride was a Ford, a 33 Ford that my mother and dad had. In fact, I have a big scar on my leg from the license plate that was on the license plates used to sit on the rear fenders. And this particular Ford, they had like a cloth top that they used to paint rubber stuff on. You know, just the top part of well, anyway. So my little brother and I were climbing on there, and we heard the back door open, and we knew it was probably Dad or somebody, and we weren't supposed to be up there because it would leak if you got up on that cloth top part. So we were scrambling down, and I fell in the corner of the license plate. Caught me right here. And that's the only big scar I have on my leg. So that was from a Ford. When I took my driver's license. Very important time in my life. But you just wait until you're big enough, old enough to get your driver's license. And my mother had a 41 Ford that I got my driver's license in. I met your father, Marshall H. Webster, at a Ford dealership. He was selling cars. I was in the office.
You don't have to tell us what happened in the Ford.
No,
You can skip
the
that
back
part.
seat. You're talking about the back seat, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I can skip that part?
Skip that
You
part.
don't, you really, well, I
We'll
can
just
tell
take
you
it
if
on-
you really want to.
We'll take it on
You don't
faith.
want to hear it, right?
We'll take it on faith. Some other things happened in a Ford. Okay, let's move on.
And all of my children, all 5 of my children, Bill, Bud, Fred, Tam, Jeff, graduated from Henry Ford II High School. And as of last week, I have 24 years in at Ford Motor Company. Now I think that is some kind of a record. I was thinking
my
of that
ship
the
count?
other. Pardon?
The ship.
No, because that was a Radford.
Oh, okay.
And your first
But then I moved to
job
Rockford.
was in Rockford.
Oh.
No, seriously, I think that's very unique. You don't find that one word means so much
Yeah.
in someone's life that I thought that was really unique.
We got to get the straight scoop on how I got my name. Now, first I got to ask, so
Okay.
did your father, did he mind being called Clyde?
Well, no, I don't think
It
so.
was
I
okay.
think he rather liked it. He was the oldest of his family. My mother was also the oldest of her family.
Do you know where the name came from? Or?
I do not know I know his name was Clyde Ellis. I do not know where the name came from.
Or what?
But his younger brother was named Claude. And then he had a brother younger than that named Arthur.
Mhm.
And then he had James. And I don't know all of his brothers. I didn't get to know his family real well. When we Bill was born in 1957. And in 1958, we brought Buddy home from the hospital. We had been on strike, or your dad was on strike. And so I had to work until Buddy was due July 5th, 1958. And so I had to get special okay from my doctor so I could work. I was working at the Teamsters Health and Welfare Plant in Seattle at the time. And I had to get a special dispensation from the doctor, and also I had to sign this waiver saying that I wouldn't turn around and sue them because I was working at the time. They didn't allow women to work after they were showing, about 3 months. But Dad went on strike. He was still selling cars at Bill Pierre Motors, and we didn't have any money, so I continued working. And so it was on a Monday night. Buddy decided that he was going to, no, he made his appearance actually on a Wednesday. But I had to go to the hospital Monday night. And I laid there all day Tuesday, and then Wednesday he was born. And when I first brought him home from the hospital, while I'm at the hospital, because we were going to have a little girl, we didn't have a boy's name picked out.
What girl's name did you have?
Mary Lynn. And so Big Bud went out to my dad and mom and told him,
Big Buds.
Yeah. My husband,
Make sure that everybody knows that.
and told him that I had had the baby. And so my dad asked him, well, what are you going to name him? And so he said, well, I don't know, maybe we'll name him after you. And I guess my dad about popped all of his buttons. So here he comes to the hospital and he tells me, he says, we're going to name this baby after your dad. And I looked at him. In the first place, Clyde Ellis is not that great a name. Although my dad was good people, he was great people. And I think that was just, just an old-fashioned name. I don't think he rather thought about it much. But it was like, that's a terrible name. But I would be darned if I was going to hurt my dad's feelings by saying, no, that we're not naming him Clyde Ellis. But it's Clyde Ellis Webster, not Clyde Ellis Burgess. But anyway, that's the way that went. So I thought, I am not calling this little 6-pound, 3-ounce, 17-inch baby. I'm not calling him Clyde. People name cows and dogs Clyde. This is not going to go. So I told Billy, this is your little buddy. This is Billy's little buddy. And so it got to be Billy's little buddy, and it's been Buddy ever since. Now he thinks his name is Bud. It's really Buddy. Because he's still Billy's little buddy.
Well, but it's not Clyde, though.
It
We're
is
agreed on
not
that.
Clyde. At this point, he is only like about 34 years old, and it's still Buddy. Because I'm the mom, that's why. Now, what else would you like to know?
Well, I don't know. Any?
I covered a lot.
Yeah. We went through a lot of years.
Went through a lot of years. Michigan has been good to me. I'm not saying that Washington wouldn't have been as good. You never know. But I don't have any regrets about coming to Michigan and raising my family.
Well, to
I
bring
do.
everybody up to date now, 1992.
I will have to say this because this is Buddy's film. Buddy decides to get married, and that's just fine. And they don't have any babies. So we asked them, well, when are you going to have some babies? Oh, we got to get out of the Navy before we have babies. Okay, no problem. We're going to get out of the Navy. Okay, now we get out of the Navy. We got to have a good job before we have babies. Okay, so now we get a good job at Eastman Kodak. They go to Rockford, Illinois. Well, they're living in a little apartment that if you turn around in the kitchen, you end up in the living room. And this is for real. Don't make too many steps because you'll be out the front door. A cute little brand new apartment, but it was little. So you can't have any babies because you have to have a house. So then they get a house, a nice little 3-bedroom, just a nice little starter house, beautiful little home. Well, they can't have any babies because by this time they have to have a car, a new car. So they buy a new Cougar, right? So,
I think it had more to do
now
with
we can't
school,
have
though.
any babies. Pardon?
I think it had more to do with school. I wanted to get through
Now
school.
we can't have it. That is not part of the story. That's not the funny part of the stories.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you can have your own. I'm talking about
Your
Grandma's,
version of the
my
story.
version of the story.
Okay, this is Grandma's version of the
This
story.
is Grandma's. So
But you put a
now
little
we can't have
disclaimer
any,
in there that this is your
we
version.
can't have any babies because we have to have a bigger house. Okay, so we get a bigger house. Well, now we can't have any babies because we have to have another new car. So we get a Sable. So finally, one day he calls me on the phone and he says, "You're not going to believe this. You better be sitting down." I said, "Oh, yeah." He says, "Yeah." He says, "I just got a promotion at Eastman Kodak and we're moving to Indianapolis." Oh, great. Fantastic. I'm
Now,
really
this
proud
is
of you. You did good.
1990.
1990.
Just so everybody knows, we've been married 12 years.
Yeah, they've been married 12 years by this time. So, they've been married, yeah. And so, then the next week he calls and he says, "I got something to tell you. Are you sitting down?" I said, "You already told me that last week." He said, No, this is more. I said, "You got your promotion. You're going to Indianapolis." He said, "Well, yeah, but this is different." I said, "Well, how different can that be?" He said, "We're going to have a baby." I said, "You gotta be kidding." He said, "Lori just stopped by the office and told me she just came from the doctor's office and we're going to have a baby." And I said, "Well, I guess they got all the houses they needed, all the new cars they needed, and now they have a baby." And this is for Caitlin Marie. And she is now almost 2 years old, if you can believe that. So, anyway, that's my son, Bud, and Lori, Now they've been married 14, going on 15 years. I think that's about it, Bud. At this point, we have Bill in St. Paul, Minnesota, who has David. And Buddy in Rochester, New York. Fred in New Baltimore, Michigan. Tammy in Shelby Township. And Jeff in Sterling Heights. Have lots of children. Oh my goodness, come here, my babe. Come here. No. She says, I just woke up or something. I just woke up. Hello, sweetheart. That's my kid. That's okay. You don't want Gamma Webster? There she is.
That's the baby.
Oh, Gamma Webster. Right?
She wants to go somewhere now.
Okay.
She's all ready to go.
Where are you going?
Mommy.
Okay.
Mommy.
It's okay, that's cute. Okay, that's about enough.
Well, that brings us up to today.
It's been a very interesting and a very good life. I don't have any complaints. I've made lots of mistakes, but that's what makes the road go by. It's all right. Because wouldn't it be dull? What a dull world this would be. And everybody, I have a right to be wrong. I like that. Everybody has a right to be wrong.
Do you have a favorite saying or a motto or anything like that that you'd like to leave us with? Your favorite little anecdote on life?
A little anecdote on life?
Yeah.
Let me think about it. Turn it off and let me think about it.
We'll do a couple things here. First, there's a poem that I've heard many times over the years. I'll give you a chance to recite that, because it's a lot easier than me writing it down. And then your anecdote on life.
This is a poem that my grandmother on my mother's side, her name was Clara Emma Collum, and that was her maiden name. And she was pure Norwegian. And this was a poem that she recited many, many poems. This is the one that stuck in my brain. And she would do her walking when she was babysitting for us kids and recite these poems. And I have not the slightest idea how old this poem is, what the name of the poem is, or whatever. But anyway, it goes something like this. I was seated in my study writing letters when I heard, Mama, Mary tells me Mama mustn't be disturbed. But I was so tired of playing with Kitty. What's another thing to do? Writing letters is your mama, can't I write a letter too? And the little face was clouded as I slowly shook my head, till I said, I'll make a letter of you, my darling boy, instead. And I parted back the tresses from his forehead high and white, and a stamp in sport I pasted mid its waves of golden light. Then I said, now little letter, run away and bear good news. And I smiled as down the staircase clanged loud the little shoes. And the little baby hastened down to Mary in his glee, and he said, Mama's writing lots of letters. I'm a letter, Mary, see? No one saw the tiny moppet as once more he climbed the stair, reached his cabin tippet hanging on the entree stair. No one saw the front door open. No one saw the golden hair as it floated o'er his shoulders in the mid-October air. Down the street the baby hastened till he reached the office door. I'm a letter, Mr. Postman. Is there room for any more? 'Cause this letter's going to Papa. Papa lives with God, you know. Mama sent me for a letter. Does you think that I could go? And the clerk in wonder answered, not today, my little man. And my darling, then I'll find another office, 'cause I must go if I can. Fain the clerk would have detained him, but the pleading face was gone, and the little feet were hurrying as the busy crowd swept on. No one saw the little moppet, no one saw the golden hair, till a voice of frightened sweetness rang out on the autumn air. Reverently they raised my darling, brushed away the hair of gold, saw the stamp upon his forehead growing now so icy cold. Not a mark the face disfigured, showing where the hoof had trod, but the little life was ended. Papa's letter was with God. I forgot a whole section in there.
Wasn't there a no one saw his...
I forgot a whole section. Fain the clerk would have detained him. You're going to have to redo this. Okay, fain the clerk would have detained him, but the pleading voice was gone, and the little feet were scurrying as the busy crowd swept on. Suddenly the crowd was parted. People dashed from left to right as a pair of maddened horses at that moment came in sight. No one saw the little moppet, no one saw the golden hair, till a voice of frightened sweetness rang out on the autumn air. Reverently they raised my darling, brushed away the hair of gold, saw the stamp upon his forehead not growing now so icy cold. Not a mark the face disfigured, showing where the hoof had trod, but the little life was ended. Papa's letter was with God. And this is one that my grandmother used to say. She always, and another one she always used to say was, "'Twas the 18th of April in 75. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April, 75, hardly a man is now alive that remembers that famous day in the year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the Old North Church as a signal light. And I, on the opposite shore, will be ready to ride and spread the alarm to every Middlesex village and farm." Then he said goodnight and rode to the opposite shore. I don't know the rest of that. But anyway, my grandmother Hammer, I should say, used to recite these poems all the time. And she had other poems that Marco, who was a trapeze artist, she had a poem of someone that was in a boat on the Great Lakes that caught fire, and or a steamer or something. Anyway, my grandma was quite a grandma. She was a lovely lady. This is my mother's mother. My dad's mother was she could take care of herself, and she was fine. She raised 8 children alone, and she did fine.
So what's your anecdote on life?
It takes all kinds. My anecdote on life, I like this one. When you've come to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on. When you have 5 children, and you come from a family of 5 children, and you'll understand.